Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jordan Lyon. Here to excited to dive in and connect with Rich and Lisa Marie, and I guess in some ways, interview Rich about his experience hosting a Microsolidarity gathering in Denver. Would you two each like to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Marie Pierre, and I am a consultant by day, but an aspiring community builder, I guess, by night. And I'm really excited to talk more about the Microsolidarity gathering.
Yep. Hi, and I'm Rich. I don't exactly know how to describe my role. I wrote a blog post in 2018 that coined the word microsolidarity, and the blog post got quite popular. And not because I'm great, but because it described an experience that lots of people were having, and I gave it some language. And so I don't I'm not responsible for all of that activity that's happening out there already, but I've got some kind of naming role to play. And I'm a convener. I say, let's do an event, and people show up. So that's yeah, those are the hats that I'm wearing today.
Beautiful. I remember the first time I saw microsolidarities, I don't want to call white paper that sharing. And I think what connected with me right away was this resonance of the fractaling out of belonging and finding it first of the integration of ourselves and all of our parts and feeling that, and then thinking about as that scales into other groups and larger groups, and whether in one-on-one relationships and in small groups and communities and collectives, and then eventually thinking of the scale of the world, and belonging as once again the integration of each individual, helping us all feel seen and heard, and that sense of belonging, and that each part of the whole is necessary and necessary in their sovereign belonging, and we need to bring that all together. And so I always connected with that right away. And so um, yeah, just as a quick framing for those that weren't there, and just to clarify, this was your first event in the US, correct, around kind of microsolidarity, Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah, this past month in October, about 25 people, I'd guess, a rough estimate, gathered in the Denver area in on a beautiful piece of land called the Everlands. I think they called it a art park, and beautiful art installations all over the land, a great community retreat space. And we co-created a 3.5 day gathering from there. We Yeah, together we all shared what we'd like to do each day, and we leaned into the messiness of emergence and co-creation, and we allowed each other to bring forth different offerings, different conversations, framings, and we danced together, we ate together, we sat around the fire, shared stories, we cried together. It was a full human experience, in all the beautiful ways. Um, and so I think the first question, just invitation, Rich, to share a little bit about the initial vision. I think Lisa Marie had shared that there was kind of a pilot or something similar that you hosted in Berlin, and the framing for that initial vision, how it's kind of maybe integrated with the journey from that initial sharing of microsolidarity into where it is now, and what was really alive in you as you stepped into that role that you naturally do of convening.
Yeah. So like I said, I wrote a blog post in 2018, and that had a kind of obvious resonance in the world. And then I started connecting just quietly one-on-one with people, and in a sort of underground network building way, people that I recognized as practitioners that were doing a kind of community building that was like, yes, that's the thing that I want to be doing, that I think I am doing, that I'm trying to give language to. And then through the pandemic, it became slightly more visible rather than just underground, because especially Nati, my partner, and we ran some online events. So we call them the Microsolidarity practice program. So it's like a couple of weeks, you meet 30 people, you go through 4 workshops, you know, you have a little taste of some practices and a little bit of concept download. We did that through, you know, all of the Zoom era. And then at this, what was it, May this year, 2022, we had the first in-person gathering in Belgium, not Berlin, in this amazing monastery. And that event is very well documented as well. So if you look on the Microsolidarity podcast, there's like a 2-hour interview with me just going into all of the details about what we did there. And it was quite different than this one. So in Belgium, we had a kind of super resourced hosting team. So we had 5 people, very experienced, very competent facilitator, trainer, counselor people, you know, people that have got experience doing trauma work and healing work and that sort of thing. So very, very, like a lot of mastery in that hosting team. And also a lot of trust between the 5 of us, like very well established relationships. So we kind of know how to play to each other's strengths and so on. So like a super hosting team. And that event was kind of 50-50 between, we started in a professional training mode where it's like, here's the expert, they're on stage, they're facilitating a participatory learning experience, and it's very structured, and these are the learning outcomes that you're going to get. That's the first half. And then the second half is open space technology being a specific practice that we use for co-creating an agenda with everyone that's there. And yeah, I think it was 5 hosts and 30 guests or 32 or something. So like a very high ratio of host to guests. And it was a great event. It was a marvelous event, very deeply connecting and in a real deep way for people to learn. But in reflection, the thing that was dissatisfying about it was because there was so much mastery in the hosting team, it felt like we had sucked up all of the opportunities for leadership. It was as if the participants were just happy to be hosted, but we didn't really give them opportunities to take ownership of and to really make the event their own. So they were like kind of going through something that we were holding. And I just knew at the end of that, I didn't want to do that again. Now I'm like, I want to do training sometimes, which is like, here's an expert and they're going to guide a process. And then open space gatherings are a different thing. And trying to blend them, it's not really for me. I mean, I could imagine doing a little bit of training, but this idea of doing a 50-50 blend doesn't really work for me, because the trainers, when you have trainers there, they've already established themselves in a position of leadership and expertise in the community. And it's very hard to equalize that after that kind of power imbalance has been asserted at the start. So my vision for the gathering in Denver, so Belgium was in May, Denver was in October. I mean, partly it's just, there's been this online accumulation of energy and people spending time together and having little one-on-ones and two-on-ones and writing on Discord. And I just wanted to get people together, you know, just to spend a few days together, because so much of what's special about the work of Microsolidarity is about the way that we feel when we come together in a certain way, and what is made possible when we feel that way. So I don't know about your experience, and I'd love to hear about it, but my experience of these kind of gatherings is that I feel who I am when I feel like I belong. And when I feel like I belong, all of these different capacities come online, that when I feel isolated or like I don't fit or I'm not welcome, all of those capacities kind of go offline. And of course, not everyone is going to equally feel like they belong. I've never experienced that in any group, but that we're prototyping the social technology to give people that experience of belonging, and then see what happens when you feel that. And it's much easier to do that face-to-face than online. We've made some progress online, but much easier face-to-face. So that was the main instinct, I think, was just to get people together and see what happens when they feel that fusing of identities coming together a bit closer. And yeah, in contrast to Belgium, I really didn't want to do a training. I really didn't want to have us leading very strongly. I wanted us to go for a kind of minimum viable container holding, that we would set some very clear, ideally would set some very clear expectations and hold the boundary very clearly, and then leave as much free space as possible and not have a very clear distinction between the professionals and the participants, that it should feel more equal. And then the day before the gathering started, 2 of the 3 co-hosts dropped out with COVID. So then things changed. So I don't know if you want me to go into that immediately, or I should pause and ask you next question.
No, that is fine. I guess I could incorporate that into the next question in terms of you wanted to develop a sense of belonging coming in, and that seems like that might have been like your dream of wild success, is like a sense of belonging of the people that gathered. But I guess with this wrench thrown into the plan, what was it like now building new trust with new individuals to help you facilitate this gathering?
Good question. I mean, let me say first that I want to be clear. The intention was not that everyone would come to the gathering and feel like they belong to the whole group. And if we were trying to do that, we would have done something different. The intention was that people would find a few people that they really feel an intimate, strong connection to, and that they would leave more able to create the relationships of belonging that they need in their life. Like, this is a temporary gathering of people. I don't expect that configuration to ever see each other again in its wholeness. So we weren't trying to fuse that into one circle of belonging, but just to get people moving in that direction where they know how I can go home and stitch together more social fabric around me. So I want to be clear about that. So then this question about what it was like to have the wrench in the plans, the spanner in the works. It was really distressing for me, extremely distressing. My way of operating, as I illustrated by the way we did the Belgium, I have like these perfectionist parts, and I'm an engineer, and I like everything to be super polished, and I like things to be flawless. That I want to design an event where every last little detail has been anticipated, and you just step in and it's like, wow, everything's so graceful and easy, and just no bumps, no awkwardness, no bad feelings, just this like perfect smoothness. And this was not available to me in this gathering in Denver because I lost my team. I don't actually cope very well with change. Let's at least say I'm autism adjacent, maybe is the easiest way to describe it. Like, I like things to be in their categories, and I like, if a plan has to change, it takes me a while to update, like days to update, before I feel settled in it. So it was very, like, from the moment that I knew my team was gone, I had 24 hours until we were opening, and I spent 22 of those hours freaking out. And freaking out meaning like constantly doubting, can I do this? I think I'm going to have to quit. I think we have to pull it off. I can't do this. And getting a little bit of help and support. And like you say, we built a new hosting team. Like, people kind of came out of the woodwork. Participants stepped forward and said, I can help. I can hold this. I'm a community practitioner. I can hold this with you, Rich. And for a minute, I would believe them and say, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to be a team. And then we'd get into it, and something would, it wouldn't be perfect. The way I try and say, hey, can you work on this? Can I delegate this responsibility to you? And it wasn't like it's like the first time we've met. Of course, that's not going to be like an extremely easy and perfect flow. But it triggered off all of these anxieties and doubts, and like, this is never going to work. I don't know how to do this. Just like really, really distressing for me. And literally like moments before everyone showed up, Abby, who was one of the co-hosts that stepped up at the last minute, she said, and not just said, but demonstrated in a way that I could believe and trust and feel the trust in my body, I've got this arrival thing. Like, I will be at the front door. I'll welcome people. I'll make sure they know where their room is and like what are just those baseline those baseline expectations are going to be set, and I'm going to welcome them warmly, and they're going to have a good experience when they arrive. Trust me on that. You don't have to be here for that. So that was like a really major chunk of responsibility taken off me, and I could believe that she had it. And then the other thing was Steph, who was the other person who stepped up. She took me aside and said, Rich, you're getting out of here. We're going for a walk, and you're going to deal with your emotions. I'm going to help. And then we'll bring you back when you're ready. And so Steph and I went for a walk, and she, basically, she did what they say, holding space, Actually, in reality, she was holding me. She gave me a big hug, and just got me to drop all of the busyness and the like sense of responsibility and all the demands, and just drop into, how are you feeling, man? Like, what's actually going on? And feel it. Like, how big is that feeling? And it's like, whoa, it's really enormous. And so I had a big cry, this like, told her about my fears, had a big shudder, like shook it off. And literally within 10 minutes, I felt like all of the tension and anxiety and panic was removed, like alleviated. And then 10 minutes later, I had total clarity about what we needed to do. It was like, I'd been so agitated and couldn't think straight for 24 hours. And then just having the right kind of emotional solidarity at the right moment alleviated all that. And the plan was in front of me. And it's like, of course, I know what to do. I've done this 50 times before, and this is fine. We're completely fine. It's just not what I expected. So that was obviously a very profound, like, this is what microsolidarity is. It's about, part of it is about co-regulation, that like people freak out. And we need companions, we need witnesses, we need partners, we need therapists, we need friends to like help us come back to our center and co-regulate and take the load off, the practical stuff as well as the emotional stuff. So like, that was just such an amazing, it was like living it in practice. And then, then I had the experience of like, oh, okay, I'm arriving with a new team, a new crew in Microsolidarity language. I don't like having a new crew, it's awkward. Like, there's these bumpy bits, and it made me feel like I was on the same level as everyone else who was showing up, that they're also sometimes a new crews and they're learning and they've come here to learn something. And so I felt like much more comfortable in my role as a co-learner, rather than showing up as the expert who's like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm very sophisticated. Look at me. It's such a polished performance. So like, a complete transition in how I usually do things, and just what the doctor ordered for me.
It seems like, as someone who wrote Microsolidarity, you had a chance to go through the framework, the scales. So you had that individual self that you had to deal with the emotions, and then you moved into like a dyad with Stephanie, and then you moved into a crew and had to drop that. It's like going up and down. And so I think it's interesting because you say that you're an engineer, you like smooth process, you like the system in place. So I guess building on that, what worked and what didn't work, now that you could step back and bring your engineer mind into the event.
Yeah. I just want to add a nuance to what you just said as well, that like, I haven't worked out how to explain this really clearly, but it's important to me that when we're thinking about this stack, like this fractal of belonging, that the bottom of the stack is not the individual. The bottom for me, it's either the dyad or the small group, and I haven't decided yet, but it's like, it's what I'm getting at here is that there's lots of different methodologies and approaches out there for personal development. There's the whole human potential movement, which was a massive thing, which I don't know, I don't think it reached its potential. and my complaint with a lot of that whole world is that it's so focused on the individual. And it's like, I was stuck on my own. Like, I couldn't do it. And there was no amount of like willpower or mental fortitude that would have cleared that out. Like, I just needed the other people. I needed the small group. I needed those dyad relationships. And it was about my ability to reach for those relationships that made the difference to me. Not something that I had inside of me, but the willingness of those people, and that like, hey, we're here, trust us. So like that's important. And then yeah, in retrospect, as the engineer, what did I learn? I think the good part of it was, well, I had a blast the whole time. Like after that distress moment, everything else was good for me. And I know it wasn't the same for everyone, but for me, it was brilliant. And in retrospect, looking at it as from a more design or engineering perspective, I think what I loved was the immersive participatory approach to learning a bunch of stuff. Like we created a context that was not just about belonging and safety and trust. It was also about ambiguity and uncertainty and volatility and confusion and what the heck is going on here, and how am I going to be okay if we haven't got all of the expectations the way that I expected them to be. Like I thought this was going to happen, but this is like, how do I deal with all of that? Like we gave people a real, genuine, lived experiences, like being in the practice, not talking about it in some abstract way, but just doing it. And that I feel was very successful. I guess the main regret that I have, or something that I want to improve next time, is to make that more explicit, we're doing these practices, we're having this experience, we're immersed in this participatory learning process, but there needs to be this point of stepping above the experience and reflecting on it and making the lessons concrete and saying, hey, look, this is my language for what just happened. What's your language? And like, how would you encapsulate for yourself? Like, what's the principle here that we're animating? And what's the take-home lesson? And like, what practices would you use instead if you were going to try and do this another time? And think that concretizing the lessons, I think, is a really crucial piece of the work. And it happened in little pockets, but it didn't happen as we didn't kind of design that as this ad hoc hosting team. And next week we've got the online reunion, so people will get together, and some of that will happen then, I think. It's happening for me now, just you all interviewing me, like it helps for that to happen. This is demonstrating I can't get these lessons on my own. I need to do it dialogically. Like I need to do it with other people. Your perspective it shifts what parts of the story that I tell, it adds to it. It refines it. It completely changes who I am. So that's the main thing, I think. I guess the other part is that we had designed for a fair amount of homework, as in we had 4 sessions before, we had 4 online sessions beforehand, and we thought that most people would come to most of those sessions and that we could do a lot of the setup work and expectation setting and sort of guide people towards different resources and help them refine their own learning question and all of that sort of stuff. We thought we could do a lot of work there, and we didn't get enough commitment or participation in those sessions to do the work that we anticipated. And then we didn't really recover from that. We just were sort of feeling the loss of like people had unmet expectations or unspoken expectations, and they didn't know where to put them. And we thought that it already would have happened, and it didn't happen, and then we didn't recover. And I think if I'd been with a more experienced hosting team, we would have noticed that. We would have designed something in for the opening or like the first day. There would have been these moments where we kind of compensated for that loss. But from my perspective, I'm like, yep, that's what happened. And it's good to learn what happens when people don't have clear expectations. But that might be a bit callous. And I'm really curious about, what happened for other people, people that maybe felt more lost or less satisfied with how things went down.
Yeah, I think that, it was a nice setup to have those pre-sessions, and I attended them, but I could see how if you don't have that critical mass, how that the ones who maybe didn't participate in that might come in kind of like, what's going on? And then maybe there needs to be some kind of ground setting. But, it is, like you said, a lesson of learning what works, what doesn't work, and continue to build on it.
I'm sitting here realizing I'm a horrible interviewer because all I want to do is go down rabbit holes. There's like all these little things I just want to tug on. There's so many beautiful sharings there, Rich. Thank you. like even, yeah, I would almost, I want to share for you saying like the starting point might be relation, like dyads or small groups. There might not be a starting point, and I think that's beautiful and complex as well. It's just like we're interrelated and interconnected all the time, and it's weaving, and we're feeling relational beings, and it's not so easy of a step-by-step process, but it's happening inside of us, and there's different tools, and I found through an experience that I had there that I had to process and move through some things on my own, and it actually took me, what I recognized was probably 8 times longer. It was, I can share this, and then I have a question around like holding space and responsibility, but I kind of would like to invite Lisa Marie just to share any thoughts or feelings you had about your experience too, and frame that for the rest of the conversation. But I had a morning that I woke up, and I went to bed feeling really connected and really like a deep sense of belonging. And my thought as I went to bed, it was this, after the second night, was this is beautiful. All of us are finding the pockets of belonging in different spaces. And I was in a song circle with a few people, and I knew that my body, for what I was going through, needed to sing. And so I got to move through what I was feeling through song, and it was beautiful. And another group was doing a circling exercise. And so they were going deep and opening up and sharing for that. And I went to bed, and then I woke up and just a little tired in a new space, a little off, and I needed to be seen that day, and I needed to have that moment there, and we could go down a whole rabbit hole about this because it was a really fascinating nuance of a moment in a community space where, at least from where I was sitting, we had a plan on the calendar for the home crews to meet, and that's what I was needing at that moment, because again, with different, yeah, the sense of belonging we're creating, we don't have time and space for everyone to share in the whole group to feel seen and heard. But by utilizing microsolidarity and utilizing small groups, each of us could find the moments where we can feel seen, and then that actually fractals out and ripples, and I feel belonging with the whole group now that I just feel seen in a small group. And so that didn't happen, and I'm given the nuance of that because it was really fascinating as at least what I observed. The group that went and got deep sense of belonging and connection in the circling exercise woke up and feeling really good and feeling good things, and it was like, oh, everything's great, but not everyone in the community was feeling that necessarily. And from those good feelings, being present, there was an interesting moment of maybe unrecognized power that could have slowed down, but it was in this, oh, feeling great about it, let's move on, and then went straight into the agenda for the day, where I needed to be integrated for me not feeling in that space, and then a little bit off it, and recognizing that there was others in the group too, because it was a small circle. And there's a lot of nuance there, and interesting dynamics of almost the leadership team getting really gooey and lovey, but not everyone else doing it, but then maybe missed opportunity to integrate people into that, and that was something that I noticed. But I think the thing that I realized later in the afternoon is I went and resourced myself because I wasn't being resourced in a small group, and it took me like 8 times longer. It was like it is 8-to-1 ratio. I don't know if it's true, but it was like all I needed to do was have 30 minutes with my HomePod, tell people, hey, I'm sensitive, I'm raw, I'm a mess, I just want to be seen, held a little bit, cry a little bit, and just be seen in relationship. But instead, I went alone, I processed alone, I lied down for a bit. Eventually, I went out in the woods, I screamed, I moved through things alone. And that was just a really fascinating like insight for me of us as feeling relational beings, that we need to co-regulate, we need to find our center in relationship. And it could have been 30 minutes in the group that I just need to be seen, or I could do it alone. And then I came back and it was there, and I still had to be seen in that in relationship. But for me to come back centered, it took longer alone. And so again, the interrelated, interconnected parts of these fractals and how we're feeling that sense of belonging were fascinating to me. And it all happened exactly how it was meant to happen, as always, because it was amazing insights for me. But yeah, absolutely. I do want to invite Lisa Marie, if you want to share anything that were things that came up for you based off what you've heard from Richard already, or just share a little bit about your experience there. We've got 25 minutes left for this conversation, and I'd love to continue to weave into we all learn things, and we all have learnings that to fractal out from here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed myself. I came to the event just wanting to meet people who had similar thoughts as I have. And so it was just, I had no expectations coming in. I just came in like, all right, these are going to be probably interesting people. Who are these people? Let me meet them and get to talk to them. And so just going throughout the week and just meeting different people, having different conversations was really fun to me. I do think and I feel like this happens to me also when I go to conferences. I go to everything. I go to like whatever the schedule says, I'm following the schedule. And that's just me as like a planner, rule follower type person. And I think I probably could have set aside more time to like rest because I'm the type who's often like holding space for people, giving advice, talking. And I was doing a lot of that. And so I think one of the nights I just went to bed early because I just needed to rest and really like rest. And I think that was something that I learned was just like in a space like this where everyone is a community builder. They're wanting to build relationships, they want to share ideas, that I definitely need to set aside time to kind of like re-energize myself. And I'm also kind of an introvert. And it was just like a lot of talking, a lot of interaction. So I would say that was probably just for me on a personal level a learning that I just need to apply to all spaces of going to conferences and events and always wanting to talk to people, but then realizing like this takes a lot of energy to think about these kind of things. But it was just so fascinating to learn from everyone, to kind of see, um, I guess like, I don't even know how to describe it, of kind of like when you put all these type of people in a room, what happens? And it was just so interesting to see like you have kind of like hippie kind of thing where around fire, there's people dancing. And then you also have like this learning aspect where people are nerding out on these like random topics. And so it just felt really cool just to be in that space of like, oh, what happens when you put a bunch of community builders together? Like we're gonna talk about community building and build and it's going to get deep in certain ways. And yeah, it was a really cool experience, and I'm happy I went. I'm happy I got to like see this concept in action. So it was cool. It was cool for me.
Can I just pick up on one of the things you said there?
Sure.
About rest. So, like I said, I've done a lot of these gatherings, not just as a host, but as a participant. And always, every time, there's a bunch of people at the end who say like, wow, I'm exhausted. I wish I'd taken more rest. And so sometimes at gatherings when I'm hosting, I tell everyone that at the start, like, there's a lot of you that are going to get exhausted and you're going to wish that you did less. And like, when you look at this agenda, you have to remember that there's like this little block on the wall that says 4 o'clock, we're doing this, but there's the rest of the wall, which is all of the freedom. And at 4 o'clock, you could be going and doing all of those other things, which are going to the forest or having a nap, whatever. And it's somehow, I'm resigned to the fact that there's no way to communicate to people beforehand. You're going to overdo it and you should rest. They just don't. I've never found a way to communicate it. And it's, yeah, it's a puzzle. And I would be happy to structure, like we had 2 hours as the lunch break, for example. That's a lot for most kind of conferences. And I would be happy to I've been to a retreat once where we worked all morning and then all afternoon was off. And then we got together again in the evening. And that's really good for me. But whenever we put breaks and things in, there's the more breaks we put in, the more pushback we get from people saying, hey, I came here, I'm fit, I'm ready to go, and I want an intense experience. Let's fill it up. And so I'm always in this tension of like, and I'm one of these people that's high energy. So I'm like, right, well, I'm just going to give people opportunities to fill up as much as they want and trust that they can rest if they want to, and know that a big percentage of them should rest but won't. And it's just a puzzle of being a convener.
It's tough because I mean there was rest on the schedule to rest. I just didn't rest. I just was like, I don't need rest. I don't want to take a nap. Like, and it's like, no, you probably should have used that time to just like go sit off to the side or something.
One cool thing that happened in Belgium. So there's a whole principle here that came to me, is it's called make memes, not rules. So a meme started in Belgium, which is one of the one of the tables in the dining hall, they put a little sign on it that just said silent table. And so if you needed a little break, you could go and eat your lunch with the other people who are not going to be talking. And more and more people joined over the course of the week because it was a longer one. More and more people found like, oh, this is a place where I can be quiet, but not feel like I'm a weirdo or like I'm not going with the flow of the group, or, you know, like that. No, here's a space for you to be, but also to be not stimulating your brain a lot. So that was a really cool example of that. Someone just making this gesture, hey, I'm going to put this little sign on the table. And then it kind of had its own natural mimetic fitness.
I have a question, but first, I wanted to share something on, well, that too, but also the resting part. It's that we're growing our capacities right now and stepping into something new. I think this is part of the co-creative emergence of like, how do we be in community together without a leader? How do we all take responsibility? And it was something I shared at the end of it was the big stress point for me, or the beautiful struggle, which was taking responsibility for carrying myself, taking responsibility for carrying the relationships that were like feeling really close to me that I felt like I had to support, and then taking responsibility for the collective. And that's a constant dance. And as we each get better at doing that, we can actually trust in emergence of it, of people stepping in when their capacity is right, and recognizing that we all have these gifts and it's all able to kind of come together there. But for people that are used to structure that says nap time is this or whatever, all these different things, it's like we've got to figure it out ourselves and actually go through the messiness of it, like fucking with the people pleasing side, or the stories that we have to show up for everything, or like the things that are like I'm going to disappoint someone or let somebody down, or like I need to show up to whatever. It's taking care of ourselves and filling our cup so we can fill others, and then finding a way that we're filling our cup and it's overflowing. And that's just what's constantly happening. And then other cups are being filled from the overflow. Actually, one of my favorite moments, Lisa Marie, was when you took your thing off of the board. That was hands down my favorite. And I won't get into the whole story of it, but we had this kind of little talk on like leaning into our edges. And it was like, I don't know, Lisa Marie, would you want to share it?
Yeah, we were talking about like leaning to our edges. What would we do? What's one way we could lean into an edge? And I was like, honestly, I didn't want to put up a session on the board, but I felt like and because I'm like a rule kind of follower, I was like, oh, we're supposed to co-create and we're making a schedule. And then Jordan was like, like when you co-create, you don't actually have to do that if you don't want to. And I was like, oh, that was like a light bulb moment. And everyone in the group was like, do you want to go take it off now? And then I think Jordan put on some song. I downloaded, I forget. Yeah,
ACDC,
AC/DC. He
Thunderstruck.
put
Like,
on a song.
it was so
And I went up
great.
to the board and I pulled it off and I just felt so good. And it was just like, I don't have to follow the rules. I don't have to follow the structure. I don't have to do a session if I don't want to. And I just ripped it off and it felt really good. That was me going to my edge and pushing myself.
That's so good. I can picture the whole scene.
Yeah.
I think you came in right after, and then sat down and actually invited you in to share something like that, to have an experience like that too. It's super beautiful. Before we get into like the post gathering and some questions of the experience that you've had since, the one question that I think I personally kind of, you shared this with me, but for the broader audience here, diving into the responsibility that you held still. What was that dance like, and where was that? I think as we're talking here, and this, it's really, it's a skill for facilitators to hold space and guide someone through an experience that can be deeply transformative. But the process of, in my experience, a lot of times that's not filling your cup all the way. And like, I even had close friends who held like a restival, and it was for 100 people to rest, and it was meditation and all these things. But the organizers, they didn't rest at all. They were destroyed, depleted by the end. And so this dance of stepping into, we are all developing the capacity to the capabilities to hold space together and to do this on a larger scale. But still, you were the convener. you were the host in a way. And so what was that flow like of where did you take responsibility as like, this is it, and needing to make sure the container was a certain way, especially from how you are, from kind of the engineering mind. And then, yeah, just what was that dance like, and any learnings or ways you would have done differently, especially thinking about the core things and needs that we had to step into that co-creation together.
Yeah. So to me, the gold standard of facilitation is that I finish with more energy than I started. That's where I'm aiming to go. And that's one of the reasons that I've learned to never host alone. Because when I'm if it's just me, there's just too much work. There's too much just trying to track all of the different social dynamics, and I kind of get obsessed. But when I've got a team, it's like, okay, between us, we can take responsibility for certain parts and it becomes manageable. And in the past, I would host a retreat and then need 2 weeks to recover. If it weren't for one thing, this one would have been completely effortless. And it was just that because of the COVID thing, Nati wasn't there. So like every night, like you said, after that circle, you felt like the team had gotten really bonded. Like, yeah, I felt really connected and bonded. And every night I felt really super warm and connected and like so full of enthusiasm. And then I would go and sleep by myself when I'm usually sleeping with my partner, and wake up alone and know that Nati's in a hotel room sick with COVID by herself, and just started every day completely like heartbroken, like this sucks. What why is Nati not here? She's done so much work to make this event happen. Why is she like, surely in retrospect, I think there would have been a way that we could have included both someone who actively has COVID and someone who's really concerned about catching COVID. Like there would have been a way to structure that. I didn't have the confidence to do that at the time, but like in future, I think there's ways of doing that, and that would have like completed my whole system would have been intact then. And then it would have been effortless. But it was effortless besides that because Abby stepped in with such competence. Like Abby's got so much experience. She's the co-director of like an anarchist school. So this kind of thing with 30 adults is like easy. Drew got there on day 2, and he's got heaps of competence as well, and so much grace, and we've got so much ease working together. So like I just felt like I wasn't making a heavy lift. After that, basically, like I said, that emotional moment that I had with Steph, after that moment, I didn't feel any stress at all, 0 the whole way through. So it was just ease. But I was still working, and it's a joyful work. It's my friend Malcolm Ocean calls it negative effort. There's a kind of work that actually just gives you energy. And for me, that kind of points at the divine spark, or what, like your unique contribution to the world is the thing that's negative effort for you to do. And it's the kind of work where I walk around and I make sure that I've got some one-on-one time with everyone there. Or I keep an eye on like who are the little clusters, and are sufficient people connected, and those 2 people seem like they've been a bit detached. Is there something that I can do? I'll make a few gestures to try and involve them in different ways. Okay, no, that's not really working. Okay, they're in their own, what we say, they're having their own workshop, like that's not mine to fix. Okay. But like doing all of that, attending that, that's very effortless for me. And then the other thing that I'm doing is being the ultimate authority in a way. Ultimate, maybe not ultimate with a capital U, but that trying to find where is the boundary line that's mine to hold. So for example, I made it clear at the gathering, like we're doing open space for the agenda, and that's my decision, and there's no input, and you can choose how you participate in that. Have as much freedom as you like, but that's what's happening. We're not going to agree on the agenda by consensus, for example. Like that's not happening. And a lot of what was happening for me through the process was like trying to understand and refine my relationship to authority, which, because I come into this work, I mean, probably like a lot of people, but specifically with my history, I've got a lot of authority issues, you know. I felt like I was on the receiving end of a lot of domination for the first 25 years of my life, and I don't want to replicate that. So yeah, I try as much as I can to like leave as much freedom for people to have their own subjective reality, and for me not to come and like squash it and to tell people who they should be or coerce them into doing things they don't want to do. But it's not as simple as it sounds, right? Like like you said about being people pleasers, for example. Like we're constantly entangled in different social dynamics that mean it's not so easy to avoid coercion. That people feel subtly coerced because they feel something different from you than what you're saying with your words explicitly. Like there's just so many intricate little details there. So I don't feel like I'm very mature in my exercise of authority. But there was one moment that was a good example where I feel really proud, which was we were in just one of the sessions. It wasn't my session, but the person who was hosting, they kind of showed up with a challenge that they're facing in their work. And they just said, I need to talk this through and get some support from you all. And we were having a great conversation, and she invited or offered, I don't know, but I said, I'll help facilitate that process for you for this 1 hour session. So I kind of had the mandate to help with the process, and we're having a great conversation. And there was 2 moments. The same person, one person shared something, and I let them have some space. And then I said, okay, and now I think we should return to be in service of the host because they've asked us to. So it's just this very easy, very graceful way of saying, okay, and I'm going to redirect the attention back to where we said we were going to go. So that felt really good. And then the same person later on, I felt that they were talking longer than they needed to be talking. Like they'd made their point, but they were still going and going. And I just said, really just looked them in the eye and said, wrap it up, in a way that they heard me, and they wrapped it up. And then the group moved on. And that felt really elegant as well. Whereas there was a couple of other times where I tried to do something similar, but there was just a tiny little edge in my voice, a little anger, you know, a little like, wrap it up, a little just that didn't feel like a very healthy, not a fully hygienic expression of my authority, let's put it that way. And so I'm like kind of tracking those things. And I would love to, I would have loved to have had more of a mandate up front for this is the kind of authority that I'm going to exercise. And if you don't like it, this is a useful process that you can use for like dealing with that tension and metabolizing it and getting it back to me in a way that I can hear it, like that we could have some kind of signaling. Like, I mean, even your example, Jordan, of like you woke up and you're feeling terrible. Like here's one process that you can use to like call in the support that you need. And yeah, maybe the agenda needs to change, and maybe the people that are taking authority need to hear that feedback immediately. And we could have made that really clear. We had planned to make that really clear, but we didn't. So yeah, I really felt the lack of that. And I felt like I just had to go off my best intentions and everyone's good faith and goodwill, and it kind of worked. But like I say, it wasn't perfectly engineered.
Yeah, there is a lot there, but because I noticed one of the times that you shared something with someone else that had the edge to it, and it was like it was a moment where yeah, and sometimes our interpersonal feelings come tied into things too about how we show up for others based on our previous relationships with them, and dynamics. Yeah, go for it, Rich.
I just want to say some more about that edge thing. So
Yeah.
That I don't know if you're thinking about the same person I am, but there was one where we had actually pre-established a lot of kind of giving each other tough feedback and being really direct and honest with each other. And so I felt fine about pushing them, and I pushed them more. And we had this relationship of, yeah, let's bring it. But what I was concerned about was all of the people like you that didn't have that context, and they see me interacting in this way, like, what are they like? Is he gonna snap at me next? You know, like that. I thought I might have triggered off a whole bunch of stories of like, oh, I better watch myself because otherwise Rich is going to snap at me. Like, oh, don't want that. Like, I thought that might be kind of rippling out through the space.
It's not where my heart went to. I need to care for this person. and then it led to and again it was caring in a way that's real love, like being like true. And it was like I think we're talking about the same thing, I assume. And it was like, okay, I'm going to show up out of care and love, and I'm going to call you out on shit too. And like that was a beautiful dance for me. So we're getting towards the end of kind of the time. Lisa, do you have any last, like maybe a last question on the kind of the post event, or anything that might be just anything like feeling alive and curious in you?
There's so many. I'm trying to decide what's the final or one of the final questions to ask. But I guess something that I think is interesting is like as you as someone who wrote this essay on microsolidarity and came up with a vision, how do you separate a one person having a vision but trying to bring a community to life through that vision so that it's not like directed by one person, it's a collective idea. So that's kind of like, what's the future of microsolidarity if the vision's in your head, but it's a concept that means it's a collective concept?
Great question. It's so I don't know. It's so hard. I feel like I'm moving towards clarity on that. Like it's coming. Um, what I see happening next is a recurring cycle. Maybe it's a monthly cycle, and a small team. So honestly, I would love it if either of you are interested in stepping into the circle. Actually, just the way that you've initiated this kind of conversation, that's the kind of energy I'm looking for, is people that have that sense of like, yeah, I want to do something here. I want to step forward. I'm imagining there's like 5 of us, 6 of us, maybe. We meet once a month, and there's a kind of forward-looking thing about what work do we want to do in the next month, and there's a backward-looking thing about what are we learning from the month that's just been, and like what adjustments do we want to make in the way that we're organizing, that sort of meta reflection level. And that in that monthly cycle, one part of the work is just to get what's internal to me external, and as it becomes external, make it more co-authored, and then eventually almost like de-authored. I've done collaborative writing processes where there's so many different people editing each other, you don't know whose words they are by the end of it. I'd love to get to that stage. And I'm starting to map out what are the different categories. So there's a whole fundraising piece, which you've participated in already. There's a whole communication, both on the like accessible storytelling, but then also in the deeper theory and how does this connect to all the existing wisdom on these topics. There's just like one after another. There's physical spaces and upcoming events, all these kind of things that are tracks of work that could happen. So just getting all of that out, I think starting to sketch in rough terms, like what are some projects that we could imagine people stepping into? Like there could be a podcast working group, and it's 3 people who are just excited about creating new content once a week or something like that. I can just imagine over the next few months, I imagine a network of sort of voluntary groups coming online, each focused on a little part of the system, synchronizing through this cycle, doing a lot of asynchronous collaboration. And then if it's true that there are enough people that are willing to do some of that voluntary contribution, then I would use that as credibility to attract sponsorship. To say, look, we've got 7 different working groups, each with 5 different people. They're working in 100 different communities around the world. This is seriously doing some good. We need to get funded. We need to have a few people that are getting paid full time, and we need to be able to deploy grants here and here. And, I can sort of imagine that stuff happening. And I don't know exactly what the time frame is. I'm trying to proceed, growing at the speed of trust. So Adrienne Mary Brown, maybe that says that, like just actually feel how quickly does this thing want to go. It's really important to me that this is a network that prioritizes the practitioners and prioritizes the embodied lived experience, and not prioritizing the theory or the storytelling or the hype or the hashtag or the like, wow, it's the next big thing. It's the crypto, it's the whatever. Like, yeah. So it needs to grow so I'm holding, for example, I decide how fast we go for now. That's really important to me. And I've got having been working towards this for the last, especially for the last 11 years, I've got a lot of knowledge that's been built up as intuitions. And I want to unpack those intuitions into like, oh, look, this much is really great. That's very sensible. And now that it's unpacked, other people can follow those as principles. And this much is your bias and misunderstandings and your childhood stories and all this nonsense. Like go through that whole process of unpacking and filtering. So yeah, I can see opportunities for people to plug in. And then the other piece of that is, I'm not sure about this, but I'm testing out the idea, testing the feasibility of running a maybe 3 or 4 month online peer support learning cohort for community organizers to really go deep, and to attract some sponsorship for that too, so that it's affordable for people to come and I can get paid to spend 2 or 3 days a week on just doing microsolidarity work and not having to be in my evenings and weekends, but really making it more of my full-time gig. So yeah, it's just about attracting the energy, shifting the priorities, getting that flow happening and doing it in a graceful way with enough reflection so that we can course correct every time my shadows get in the way. And I can imagine over the course of a couple of years, it could easily be completely co-owned where I don't feel like I've got a particularly special role to play. I've done that with organizations in the past. But it's just that this organization is more precious and ambitious than anything I've attempted before. So we'll see if we can collectively pull it off.
Thank you. Yeah. Before I get into closing, there's this juicy, like, I don't know how, there's something around source and power and co-creation that it feels really like accepted or unrealized for a lot of communities taking this, where it's I think when a vision is dependent on relationships and co-creation, the spark or the person calling or convening has to take responsibility and name what is like theirs and what's not. And I've struggled with that with a lot of communities that are starting up, of wanting and not knowing where to give up and where to take. And it's the two analogies I've had, and I showed Lisa Marie yesterday. It's like, I need to know if I'm being invited that, okay, we're going to build a train and we don't quite know where it's going, and we're building all the cars and we're building it from the ground up. Awesome. If that's happening, tell me, and I'm going to bring all of it. If the train actually is kind of already going somewhere and just needs these cars built, I'm cool for that too. And I can co-create from that lens, but I need to know that. And I feel like there's something there. And so I think the two things I really liked what I heard there are leaning into responsibly naming that, and also taking responsibility for putting relationships first. And that doesn't mean co-creation like breaks everything apart and then allows too much. You can have co-creation, like relationship building and trust building and like deep belonging as the train is already set, and so it's not necessarily needed. But that nuance and like that again, as like naming it, taking responsibility for it is I think an edge for a lot of people, because they don't want to have that power. They don't want to name that as a power. And there's a lot of dynamics that come with identity and privilege and what we're stepping into and what feels right for the time. But there's something there that leans into it. And also, like you said, bring in relationships that catch your blind spots and constantly course correcting for who you are naturally, and doing all that. And so we're 5 minutes past the hour, which means bright and early for me, but evening and afternoon for you two. And so maybe we'll just do one round of closing, call it kind of complete on the recording, and then just yeah, some quick thank yous there. Lisa Marie, would you like to start, or anything alive in you that you want to get out either?
I'm just really excited we had this conversation. It's great to learn from both of you all. I think this is important work, thinking about how do we work together. That's something that's important to me, and I really just enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you both for sharing thoughts and discussing this. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I'm thinking about how, yeah, it feels very supportive to have people show up and say, I want to help excavate the lessons. And not just for the three of us, but to know that we're inside of something bigger, and that those lessons, I mean, I'm thinking about the people who are at the gathering that will review this and hopefully get a new perspective on their own experiences and crystallize some ideas, and also, hey, wait a minute, that really didn't match my experience at all, and I want to hear that, you know. And in the wider circles of people that can metabolize these lessons, it's super important to me that we are learning how to accelerate the learning process in an intelligent way, which means let's make our lessons portable. They shouldn't just be stuck with, oh, I had this amazing experience and it's just my private lesson. No, there's a way to package that so that it's relevant to lots of people. So yeah, super grateful to the two of you, and grateful to who I'm anticipating might be listening and having their own process and kicking off that thing. It's really wonderful to be part of a network that's coming alive.
That makes me also want to invite, if anybody, especially from the gathering, has any thoughts, record a little video and send it back, and then we're just going to have a flow of these videos of reflections. That feels juicy and alive. And if you're watching, do it right now. Do it with what's alive in you. This is the pokey ask at the end. Yeah, just drop your shit. Don't put it on tomorrow's to-do list. Just
Yeah.
record 15 minutes and share what's alive in you. I thank you both. I feel nourished from this. This is a beautiful way to start my day. I will end the recording here, but thank you everybody for listening to. This has been a gift. It's been a gift.